could not hold you down. You are the reason. Seated in majesty. You are the reason, King, that could not hold you, that could not hold you down. You are the reason. Sing hallelujah, hallelujah. You have won the victory. Hallelujah. You have won it all. You have won the victory. That could not hold you down. Oh God, you are the reason. Seated in majesty. You are the reason. That could not hold you down. That could not hold you down. You are the reason. Seated in majesty. You are the risen King. Let's sing hallelujah one more time. Hallelujah. You have won the You have won it all for me. Let's lift our voices up, glorify His name. Lord, we worship you. Lord, we lift your name up, oh God. No one can take your place. You're worthy. You're worthy.
Praise the Lord. Okay. So our theme this month is the Great Commission. Last week we went over the topic, the harvest is plenty, talking about why, like what we need to be doing when it comes to our roles and our duties as Christians. So this week we'll now be talking about laboring in the vineyard. We'll talk about how and what it is and what we should be doing and what our roles are and how we should fulfill that in order to please God. So our text for this week is going to be from Matthew 21 to 16. I'll read that myself. So this is the chapter, Laborers in the Vineyard. For the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of an estate who went out in the morning at dawn to hire workmen for his vineyard. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went about the third hour, which was roughly 9 a.m., and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right, an appropriate wage. And they went. He went out about the 6th hour, which is around noon, and the 9th hour, 3 p.m., and did the same thing. And about the 11th hour, 5 p.m., he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day? They answered him, because no one hired us. He told them, you go into the vineyard also. When evening came, and the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last to be hired and ending with the first to be hired. Those who had been hired at the 11th hour, 5 p.m., came and received a denarius each. Now when the first to be hired came, they thought they would get more, but each of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they protested and grumbled at the owner of the estate, saying, these men who came last worked only 1 hour, yet you made them equal to us, who have carried most of the burden in the scorching heat of the day. But the owner of the estate replied to one of them, friend, I am doing you no injustice. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. But I choose to give to this man hired the same time as I give to you. Am I not lawfully permitted to do what I choose to do with what is mine? Or is your eye envious because I am generous? So those who are last in this world shall be first, and those who came first, or those who are last, or those who are first will be last. Okay. So that's the text which this message is based on. I just want to go through the highlights of the point because this is a parable of, because when Jesus was speaking, he meant something different to what this parable was saying. So the landowner that was mentioned in this verse is actually God. If I'm sure everyone knew that though. And he went out looking for people to work for him during different times of the day, starting with the early morning to then 5 p.m. And then those who called didn't have a job, but they were just standing idle in the marketplace with nothing to do. And they were giving the same pay with the people who started early in the morning. And the people who came first thought that this was a problem because they would be working so long compared to the people who just came at the last hour. So they thought they would get more, even though God told them at the beginning that you would get paid denarius. But they now thought they would get paid more because the people who came last received the same denarius as they did. So just to point out, the laborers in this chapter are people who have been saved by God. They were standing idle in the marketplace, and God called them to work for Him. So they've already been saved. They've been taken out from the idleness with nothing to do, with no purpose, no job, and been taken into working for God. And the payment denarius that was used is actually our hope of salvation, the thing that we are hoping to get at the end of this life, what we are working towards and what we're waiting for. So the denarius that God had told them that He would give, that's our eternity with God for the rest of after this world ends. And it says also in it, we said that the people they were just standing around with nothing to do. And I kind of saw from this it was similar to what it says in John 15, verse 4 to 5. I'll quickly, if someone wants to just read that, John 15, 4 and 5. Can someone read?
John 15, verse 4 and verse 5. Remain in me, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Verse 5. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing.
So just as it's saying that apart from me, you can do nothing, they were standing idly in the marketplace with nothing to do. And even though it says that they were doing nothing, they could have been shopping, they could have been looking around, they could have been like hanging out with their friends playing, but there was nothing tangible that they were doing. They were just standing around with nothing actually worth anything to God. So they weren't actually doing or producing any fruit at all. That's why it says, without me, you can do nothing. Things that people do in this world, unbelievers do in this world, they might seem like they're doing a lot. They might seem like they're doing more than you. But when it comes to God, how does it glorify God in any way? If it's not glorifying God, if it has nothing it doesn't have any worth. So that was what it counts as doing nothing. So it said that they were standing around because no one had hired them, which is in verse 7. So they had nothing to do. And then in verse 8, it says that the people who came last got paid first, and our reward is heaven, our salvation. So even though that the people came first, or that they will receive nothing more, but if you think about it, if we have a salvation that we're hoping for, there's nothing more than you can get except from that. So the people who come first, or the people that have been saved 25 years ago, and then the people who were saved just like maybe a year before Jesus returns, is all the same. We all got the same thing. I feel like that's what God was trying to show through that part, because some people that have been saved a long time, it showed that they had like a pride, saying that, oh, we were here longer, we've been here working, and then they get the same thing as us. But I think God is trying to show us that not only heaven isn't through your own efforts, just because they were there for a long time, even though that they were working for God, they kind of had like this detachment from what they were really doing. And I feel like during that ending part, the people who normally come last, they still have the memory of what God has done for them. And because I'm sure everyone can imagine, like when you were saved, the kind of emotion that you had when you were saved, the excitement of how much God has done for you, and you're so grateful. But then as time goes by, your emotions kind of change. Like the meaning loses like emotion. But then the people who are just recent, they still have all that fire in them. And I feel like that's what I was talking about doing our Bible study, talking about the communion, something we have to take daily to remind ourselves, because we tend to forget lots of things like that. So I feel like the people who came first, they kind of forgot this detachment from God, and they were just thinking about the fact that they were there first, and they didn't actually realize that at the end of the day, that's the thing that God promised them, and that's what they had. So those are the parts that I wanted to highlight from the reading. And then now I just want to go into how do we labor. So before we go into that, we need to understand how we can work, how we can be laborers in the vineyard. And before we can be called to be laborers in the vineyard, we need to have a desire in our hearts to be willing to work for God. Because those people in the market, they were standing in the marketplace already and they were waiting for someone to hire them. They were already there waiting for anyone to come and ask them to help them to do something. They're already like putting them in there. They're already in the position for God to approach them, to ask them to work for them. So for us, for God to be able to call us to work for him, we need to have that desire in our hearts as well, to work for him and to want to be fruitful and to want to do something for him. And so if we're not in that position in our hearts to have that desire to work for God, we can't work for him at all. He can't force us to now work for him. If we don't have that, we've not come to that spiritual maturity that we want to now do something, we want to be fruitful, we want to produce something for God. We can't reach that same amount. So that first part is that if we want to be laborers in the vineyard, we need to have the desire to be fruitful. If we're not in that marketplace, in our hearts, basically, if we're not in that place, God can't actually call us. We need to have the desire first. I remember before I started my YouTube channel, around that time period, that's when we kept talking about fruitfulness and our spiritual gifts and how to be fruitful. I think that's around the time we had a special guest that came and preached to us about fruitfulness and things like that, and to be fruitful in your ministry. So around that time, I had so much. I was like, what am I actually doing? I've been a Christian for so long, but I have nothing I'm actually doing for God. How am I using any of my spiritual gifts? And I started writing them down, all the spiritual gifts, and I was like, how can I use all these different things? And then I think now a couple of weeks after that, that's when I had the idea to start having my YouTube channel. That's when I had an encounter, God telling me to go and preach outside. So if I wasn't at that place in my heart, desiring to do something for God, I wouldn't have been able to now, God wouldn't have now said, okay, now that you want to do something, I'll give you something to do. So if we want to be laborers, first we need to have the desire. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next point. What is the labor that we need to do? So let's imagine the vineyard that is talking about in Matthew 20. So if you think about a vineyard, it has a huge field and there's like rows and rows and rows of crops and harvests and all that. And you can just imagine the amount of work that you'll need to put in for you to collect all the crops and having to take care of them and prune them and stuff like that. So you need a lot of people. So that's why in Matthew 9:7 says the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. So if you think about a huge vineyard like that, there's so much work that we need to do. And I wanted to check exactly what we actually need to do in a vineyard. So I checked up a job description of vineyard workers on Google, and I saw there was a couple of them. I don't actually know what they are, but I don't think we need to. There's this wire lifting, there was leaf picking, shoot selection, plucking, and stripping of leaves, and something like that. I'm not sure if anyone knows what that is, but those are like the different roles that's needed to work in an actual vineyard. So now we're thinking about our vineyard, which is God's kingdom, and how many different roles that there are to work in that kind of vineyard, and the amount of work that needs to be put in, and how many laborers that there need to be there. So what is the actual labor that we need to put in God's kingdom?